as an executive, you as a senior leader are a corporate athlete. You need to have the proper environment. And what that means is a version of enough sleep, proper nutrition, moving your body, some sort of downtime and de-stressing. Do not be confused that you're not expected to perform at a high level. If you're not taking care of yourself, guess what you're going to do? You're going to make bad decisions, and then it's going to be time consuming to go repair that damage.
You got to take care of the whole thing. How do you disagree without creating confrontation?
Well, there's a few tools. Number one is 95% of high performers experience the feeling that you've gotten everywhere in your life because of luck, but your luck is about to run out. And that is the feeling of imposter syndrome.
Do you recommend any tools for people to deal with that? Alisa, what an honor it really is to have you here, and thank you for making the time and accepting the invite to come to the podcast.
I'm so happy to be here. I can't wait for this conversation.
No, me as well. You've been named one of the top executive coaches worldwide, but Thinkers 50, if I'm not wrong. And you work with a very prominent startup leader and C-suite executives, but as well Fortune 500 companies. I mean, Dell, Google, Pfizer, Hitachi, J&J, etc. And what's interesting about you is that you've seen this both sides. What C-level executives face at large organizations, smaller organizations, and as I was sharing with you before we started the recording, it's really, you have this way of taking these complex management and leadership topics and transform them into actionable advice like executives can apply just right away. So I'm really excited about this conversation. But before we get into that, for those who don't know you, what do you do? And probably most importantly, why do you do it?
Great. Yeah, great question. So I'm an executive coach. As you said, I've been an executive coach for 25 years. When I think about what that means is I work with elite leaders and I help them think about where are they going, and how are they going to get there. And so why do I do it is because 25 years ago, maybe just a little bit more, I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do instead of sort of the journey that I was on. And I had this music in my head that said to make a difference, that the work of my hands mattered. It was really important to me to make a difference. And I met a coach and it was like violins played, like that's what I want to do, because I was sort of really felt like that was anyway my mission. It really felt like that's kind of what I did in life anyway. And I definitely could see how I could make a difference. And so that set me off the path to become a coach. And that's what I've been doing for 25 years.
Great power of summarizing. 25 years. Before that, you were an executive. I think you worked at PwC and some other companies, and then you made that transition. I saw some different podcasts where you did that. But what's interesting is, as I was saying, you saw what C-level executives at large organizations struggle with and startup founders struggle with. But I wanted to ask you, because you have quite a unique perspective, and it is from all these different leaders that you've met and you work with. What are the qualities or some of the qualities that you admire the most in these leaders?
Well, right. I've met a lot of leaders and I admire a lot of their qualities, but a few that come to mind are definitely confidence, right? The sense of like, I know that I can do this and I know that I can lead people here, aligned with humility. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm a fellow learner. I'm on the path like everybody else. I'm open to feedback. And, it's like the sort of confident can afford to be humble. And I think those twin qualities are very significant. I would add something like drive. You cannot be a leader if you don't have focused drive. And so you need to really burn with some sort of passion about where we're going, about the team, about the mission, one way or the other. And if you don't have that, I don't think you can really be an effective leader. So those are some that come to mind.
So those are some of the qualities. And then from the other side, you kind of get to work with them in quite a personal level. And I can imagine when you talk to them and start working with them, they share what they're struggling with.
Yes.
Right? So in general, these leaders, what do they tend to struggle with the most? I know it's different for every person, But in general, what are the top challenges they face that they come to you for advice?
Yeah. I mean, really everyone is different and they show up in different flavors, but I think
Yeah.
some common challenges are the distinction between their intention and their impact. So you and every executive I've ever worked with are the expert on their intention, and everybody around them is the expert on their impact. And it is very unusual. It's very challenging for a leader to really understand the impact they're having. Like, it's a sense of like, I didn't mean that, or no, I didn't, I didn't intend for that. You are the expert in your intention. Everybody around you is the expert in your impact. And marrying intention with impact is very challenging for executives because they're just human beings being themselves. And they have no idea what it's like to be across the table with themselves. So that's a big challenge to kind of figure out, sort of like how to show up in a way that is going to really showcase what you mean, your full intention. So that's one thing. The second thing is that when you're a leader, your suggestions are orders. Your inklings are orders. Your brainstorms are orders. And of course, your orders are orders. And so it's like hard to remember that when you're addressing your team, you're often standing, it's like the image is like you're standing up on a table with a bullhorn telling them what to do. So for example, one client, this is very memorable, and this is in my book, From Startup to Grown Up. They had the holiday party, and the next day he said, "Oh, it was just down the street." And he said, "Oh, that was such a great party. It was such a convenient location. If it had been any more convenient, it would have had to be in the parking lot." And then in August of that next year coming up, someone said, "Did you want a tent in the parking lot for the holiday party?" And he was like, "What are you talking about?" And they said, "You said you wanted the holiday party this year in the parking lot." And he's like, "I didn't say that." But his suggestions, his inklings, his brainstorms, just his free associations show up as orders. And so it's just important to remember as a leader, and that's what they, people sort of forget, is that that's how they show up. The suggestions are orders. And the third thing, and this is counterintuitive and maybe almost like paradoxical to what I just said, you have to keep repeating yourself. And what leaders forget, they're like, "Oh, I said it." In fact, I worked with an executive, a CEO, and she was talking about the expectations of her team and how her team wasn't meeting her expectations. I said, "Well, have you told them your expectations?" She said, "Oh, yes." I said, "Okay, well, what did they respond?" She said, "Well, I sent them a Slack." And so I said, "Okay, show me the Slack. Show me the Slack." And it took her, many minutes to dig through her Slack where she sent with this one little thing to people and had no sense of the need to reinforce, repeat, reinforce, repeat. So in order to really break through on what's important. So there are other challenges, of course. Those are challenges executives face in common. I would say that also some executives, their stress reaction is to lash out. Some executives, their stress reaction is to shut down. You have to be aware of what your stress reaction is, of what your tendencies are. And then you've got to find your way to act in a different way than what feels natural to you.
Yeah. And you were talking about this aspect of not having no idea of what it's like to deal with you from the other side of the table, right? You don't know how you're perceived by others. Any sort of recommendation that you have for these executives is any tool, anything they can do,
Lots
help
of tools.
from human resources.
Yeah.
What would you recommend them?
Well, it's really helpful because we're talking to human resources folks out there. So you can really facilitate this for your executives. And also this is a good tool for you also. But obviously 360 feedback is a very helpful tool to show what it's like to be with you. So what that is, I'm sure everybody knows, is that, a coach or somebody else goes around and asks folks around the executive what's working, what are their strengths, what's not working, what are their blind spots, obstacles, development opportunities, weaknesses, and what specific suggestions do you have to provide a roadmap for people about how they can change. So that's a very, very powerful tool. But if you're not going to go and get 360 feedback, a very big tool is for you to have open-ended feedback, to set up context for people where they can shut the door and tell you what's actually going on. from both themselves and their point of view, or like from like sort of the people that they're responsible for. And then I think it's very helpful for you as an executive to learn to read the room. So you say something and then you're like, there's a little bit of an uncomfortable silence when I say this one thing. I wonder why. And so just being able to see yourself in that way and trying to sort of tune into the environment and develop situational awareness just by being a pristine noticer of what's going on around you, those are a set of tools that you can use to help get a perspective on what it's like to be with you.
That's a helpful one. And then you were talking, and I reminded a conversation that I had with a former CEO of MetLife in one of the largest markets in Latin America. And this guy was saying, when you think you conveyed your message clear enough, just repeat it and repeat and repeat. And when you think they understand, keep repeating it, keep repeating it. Because I think that's what it's all about. There's so many priorities and people are paying attention to so many different things that if you don't just repeat. I heard this phrase that we need to be reminded more than we need to be taught, right?
Yeah, that's a great phrase, actually, to be reminded more than we need to be taught. I think that's so true. And to your point also, people are dealing with their jobs. They're dealing with their home lives, of course, and they're dealing with their jobs. They have to like deal with their people. They have to get the strategy document done. They have to finish the budget. They have to have meetings. They have to respond to emails. They have to fill out their forms, a million things they're doing. They're not remembering the key message that you want them to remember. They're not remembering the most important ways you want them to show up. And also you made a change and adjust your own thinking on this, and they didn't hear that from you this week. They've heard it from you last week or the week before. So it's out of date. So just remembering to keep tying off and keep repeating and keep reinforcing the most important things. That is very helpful.
So when can leaders repeat this vision? Because you have different settings. The email, the Slack, probably one Slack message won't do it, right?
Right.
So how do you recommend them to keep sharing that vision? And is it in one-on-ones? Is it town halls? What are the different avenues where they can keep repeating that until it's clear, so clear enough for people to go with?
The answer is yes. All of those.
Okay.
You want people to it's very helpful because you as a senior executive or you as the CEO, you as a senior leader, you have a lot of opportunity to bring groups of people together. You can address the all hands, your own department, whatever it is, but absolutely you want to tell people in the all hands the most important thing. And by the way, the more senior you are and the more people you're communicating to, the more you need to keep it simple. So that is one thing. The second thing is, of course, large groups, small groups, one-on-ones, in writing, by email, by Slack, just in passing conversations. It is so important to have top of mind the most important thing and the key messages and the key things you want people to convey or you want to convey to people. And because that's going to be very different in different scenarios. Like, for example, one of the companies I used to work with, was really focused on growing revenue. And so, which is great, right? And that's a simple message. But they were not focused on things like cutting costs or even organizational efficiency. By the way, I'm not judging that choice. It's a choice they made, and that was really working for them. So they wanted to keep reminding people that you don't get extra points for operational efficiency. You get extra points for speed and growth. And so that's what the message was, speed and growth. And whenever you had a proposal or you ever had a meeting you wanted to do, it was like, how are you affecting speed and growth? And so that was like the key message that needed to get, really reinforced. Yeah. In the example I was telling you about earlier, she really wanted her executives to, as we always say, step up, right? By the way, I have a lot of problems with that because it's like, what do you mean step up? But okay, right there, step up. So that's where the discussion was, what do you mean step up? And she would always say, she sort of came to realize for herself, to be proactive and take initiative. Great. And so the need there is in large groups and small groups and all hands to celebrate being proactive and taking initiative, to invite people in one-on-ones, to showcase being proactive, take initiative, to remind people that that's the most important thing we're focusing on right now. So it can really be the vision, as we say. It can be kind of the expectations around the company, expectations around leadership, whatever it is, have it in your mind and keep reinforcing that.
And be simple. Make it simple.
Definitely.
Great, great. You you mentioned it briefly there, but we have all personal lives and taking care of our families and ourselves, etc. And this is something you talk about quite a lot, which is in your book, and it's self-managing,
Yeah.
managing oneself. You talk about taking care of yourself, and so how does taking care of oneself makes you a better leader?
Yeah.
And what are your suggestions, for busy executives that probably don't have time to meditate 2 hours a day, or go on a 3-hour exercise?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It always comes back to meditation. Everyone's always like, oh, I don't have time to meditate. All right, don't meditate then, right? Let's start there. But it's exactly right. Here's why it's so important. You, as an executive, you as a senior leader, are a corporate athlete. Do not be confused that you're not expected to perform at a high level. You're expected to perform at a high level. And to do that, you need to have the proper environment. And what that means is a version of enough sleep, proper nutrition, moving your body, some sort of downtime and de-stressing. And that's not because I'm a nice person and I think you should have some downtime. That's because if you don't have that and don't get enough sleep and you're eating like crap and you're not doing any kind of stress reduction, and you're not taking care of yourself, you show up at work with a lack of vitality. When you show up at work with a lack of vitality as a leader, that really shows up to everybody around you, and it's catching to everybody around you. When you don't do a good job getting enough sleep, for example, then you come in and you're tired, and guess what you're going to do? You're going to snap at your executives. You're going to snap at your direct reports. You're going to snap at your colleagues, and that is not going to get what you want, and then it's going to be time consuming to go repair that damage. If you eat badly, and if you have a high carb lunch and then you're tired and exhausted after that, as the crash happens, then again you're going to make bad decisions, you're going to snap at people, and you're not going to be your best as an executive. So it's not I happen to be a health nut, but it's not you should be a health nut. It's more you will not be able to do your job unless you have some basics around your life, basically. Right. I know it's hard. I know it's hard if you are I just met with an executive 2 days ago, and she's got 3 kids under the age of 5, and she's got a very big job, and her husband has a very big job, and it is very challenging for them to do anything. But what we talked about was carving out specific time. In their case, they have a nanny, and the nanny can take the kids for a specific amount of time. She was feeling guilty about that. My point is if you don't take care of you, the whole metaphor of the oxygen mask, right? If you don't take care of you, you won't be as good a mom or a leader or a family member. And so carving out time and giving the kids to the nanny and it being this is mommy's time. That's number 1. Number 2, it's working out with her husband, the sort of time where they can both exercise or whatever they want to do. That will be sort of just movement. It's also, I think people are oh, I don't have time to meditate 2 hours or whatever. I don't have time to go for a 6-mile run. Great. Don't go for a 6-mile run. Go for a 20-minute walk. Go on a walk and talk with your employees. Go on a walk and talk with your spouse or with your kids or whatever it is. And combining those kinds of things. And then also stress, same thing with stress release. Maybe there's a funny comedian that you could watch with your whole family for 20 minutes before or after dinner. You have to find the ways. And I think what people say is, oh, I don't have any time. Do a time log. You do have time. You must find time. And you need to just be more organized about how you think about your overall kind of, let's say, sort of health architecture.
Right. You got to put in the time in your calendar and be corporate athlete. I love that term.
Yeah.
So if you don't take care of that, you really won't be able to be effective. Has it ever happened to you? Have you worked with an executive that this part was kind of not that good?
Oh yeah.
And after giving proper attention to their sleep, nutrition, etc., the people that work with them and their employees saw a difference in this person?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Several times, but one CEO in particular comes to mind. He wasn't getting enough sleep. He wasn't into his fitness. He definitely had some issues around sort of sleep and tiredness. So we set up a routine for him where he committed to going to bed by a certain time, waking up at a certain time. He committed to moving his body 2 days a week. He hired a trainer. He kind of got himself to get like his family life. He got the family life together in order to do those things. He also, I really insisted that he go to the doctor and get tested for different deficiencies. Turned out he was deficient in magnesium. He took magnesium. And that already gave him more energy. And so by a month and a half, like 6 weeks later, he was like bursting with energy. And everybody around him noticed that he was bursting with energy, more creative, more solutions oriented, and frankly, nicer to be around. So with all that, they made a lot of changes in the company and the structure and what they were working on as a result of his renewed energy. It really makes a difference, obviously in your life, but if you're not going to take my word for it in terms of your life, definitely in your career.
It is crazy how it's all connected.
It's all connected.
Bodies, our minds. I mean, you cannot just take care of one area or another area. You got to take care of the whole thing.
Yes.
Like,
true.
You need to.
You need to.
That's crazy. One aspect and that I saw you talking about as well, it's self-doubt. Which is more psychological, or I'm not a doctor at all, but I don't know. But that seems to be something like we all have in some shape or form, right?
Yes.
I don't know why. I don't know if it's come. I don't know why people have that. Why we have it. I have it as well. I mean, everybody has it. How do you deal with that? You get promoted to a big position, or you go to a new company and you feel like you don't really belong there. And do you recommend any tools for people to deal with that? How can they look at that differently?
Yep. And so I talk a lot about this in my book, From Startup to Grown Up. And what I think you're referring to is the idea of imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome, if you've never heard of it, is the feeling that you've gotten everywhere in your life because of luck, but your luck is about to run out. You're going to be caught. You're going to be found out to be a fraud. And that is the feeling of imposter syndrome. You can call about that, and also severe self-doubt. And that is, when you say everyone has it, not everyone has it, but most people have it. And specifically your audience, it turns out 95% of high performers experience at some point imposter syndrome in their lives. And that includes Serena Williams, and that includes Howard Schultz from Starbucks, the founder of Starbucks. And that includes, other Lady Gaga, actually. So many people are experiencing imposter syndrome. And if you're experiencing that, it's normal. So first of all, your self-talk can really help. Number one, it's normal to feel this way, and tell yourself that it's normal to feel this way. I am not alone. I am feeling this way. Number two, it's very helpful to tune in on exactly what you are saying to yourself. So many times people have imposter syndrome in a certain context. It might be you're promoted, as you just said, to a new role, and you're actually totally fine working with your new colleagues. You're embarrassed and uncomfortable about working with your former peers who are now your direct reports. And so that's where you kind of feel like the imposter, like they're going to find you out there rolling their eyes behind your back. Or it might be, as one, I worked with a startup founder, and he did a fantastic job, a shockingly good job raising money. He raised a ton of money, but he was having a lot of trouble. So he was obviously a good sales guy, right? Because he could raise all this money. But he had a lot of trouble recruiting senior executives. It's like, what is going on here? Why do you, and he had all these reasons, because of these reasons. But it turned out when we really talked together, he said, I feel uncomfortable pulling them away from their big company, which is a safe job. And what if we don't make it? So like he was the imposter, like he was running around like playing startup, and he could play startup by taking the money from the VCs, but he couldn't play startup by getting senior executives to come and join him. So we had to really work through that. Like, what are you telling yourself, and tuning into what you're telling yourself, and then combating it with different points of view, including, I'm no good at this. Yeah, you probably aren't no good at this. You're just going to learn, but you've learned things in the past, or in the case of the client I was telling you about, the feeling of, I'm going to take them away from their safe jobs. Well, actually, you're giving them an opportunity that they wouldn't have in their safe big company, So it's like totally the self-talk that you talk about is really important.
How you frame it, right?
How you frame it. That's right. Then the second tool it's a good one for everybody, is to do a highlight reel. So what's a highlight reel? A highlight reel is your best of moments where times that you overcame challenges, that you were really successful and you were proud of yourself. And what's helpful is if you physically, like literally write them down, write them down, these experiences you had, and write 6 to 8 experiences you had that you overcame challenges or you're really proud of them. And then you can read them when you're having trouble, when you're like feel afraid it's not going to work out, or you can read them every day. So one of the clients I gave this to, a very heavy hitter at a large company, and he had this little boy inside of him who was like an imposter. And I said, why don't you do this highlight reel? And he was like, oh my God, Alisa with her woo-woo stuff. So just to humor me, he did the highlight reel. And when I saw him again a week and a half later, he was beaming. And I was like, what happened? And he said, I did the highlight reel like you forced me to do. Yes, I'm such a bad person. I forced him to do it. Yeah. And I read it every day. And I was so pumped up by reminding myself of these experiences. I then tackled something hard right there and then. And so I had complete drive and momentum throughout my day. And, you know, it just was a transformative experience for him. And I just want to remind everybody, it's like a lot of what we're able to do is what we tell ourselves. So when we are able to be in control of what we tell ourselves and then combat it with different tools and structures, it really helps.
And it's really how you look at the problem, how you look at the thing, and how you talk to yourself, right?
Definitely.
What's crazy about this is you have probably more in the corporate world, you have this situation, and well, that person's not really ready to do this, and it's that and that experience and that. I was talking to Steve Cadigan. I'm not sure if you heard of him. He was the first CHRO of LinkedIn, and he was talking about this experience where, they were having people in the company and they needed leaders, and they couldn't find them, so they had to promote from within the company and give people opportunities that technically they weren't ready for, and that unlocked a lot of energy, and people, you're going to trust me to do this, and that unlocked a big energy. And well, LinkedIn is what we know it is today, right?
Yeah.
But putting people in places they're not prepared, but if you give them support and stay with them, they we're humans, we can learn stuff.
Yeah,
exactly. We can do things better.
That's right. That's a good self-talk. We're humans, we can
there's
learn.
Practicing it a little
That's
bit
very
here.
good.
Something that you hear a lot in the corporate world as well is this term of executive presence, right? Which is different to different people as well. I mean, it can mean many different things, but what is your perspective on what makes someone have a strong executive presence?
Yeah.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, executive presence is one of the worst things. It's so squishy, right? Like, what does it really mean? Do you either have it or you don't? Well, yes and no. There are people who have it or they don't, but like there are ways that you can convey executive presence. So you got to think about this is like how you show up, your kind of essence, what you are dressed like, and how you communicate, or I should say how you look and how you communicate. So the way you show up, if you're telling this is where the sort of the power pose thing came from. Like if you're showing up like tentative, like, do I belong here? That's not executive presence. It's more like if you show up, I think about this as like showing up like a host and not like a participant or not like a guest. And so if you walk into a party as a guest, you're like, oh, where's the drum? Am I alone to be here? But if you show up at a party like a host, even if you're not actually the host, you walk in like, okay, I want to make sure everything's okay. You address people like you're in charge, like, thank you for coming. And you can take that and translate that into your overall energy and like your presence by itself. So that's number one. Number two, how you look. So it was like, oh no, it shouldn't be that way. It is that way. People look at you and they make judgments. So it's about dressing for the occasion. It's about making sure that you feel good in your clothes. It's about knowing that sort of what's appropriate in the context of where you are. And again, that you're feeling good about what you're wearing and the expression on your face and how you're kind of groomed. Then the third is around communication. When you're speaking to senior executives, they often want bullet points, get to the point. When you're bringing people along, you have to often do storytelling, discerning what is needed for that audience and giving that to them in terms of communication is essential to executive presence, as is listening. So it's about speaking in the manner that's going to work for you and then listening and getting feedback about what's working.
Yeah. So all of that is, and you're talking about communication here, which is a pretty broad topic. But if you break it down on what a good communicator has, or what are the skills of a good communicator? If you have to break it down, what will those be?
Well, I think a good communicator, the most important thing is they're able to tune their message to the audience. So when you're talking to a group of marketers who are managers, that's very different from talking to a group of finance executives. And you've got to be aware of that and think about what's going to matter and tune to them. In addition, inside of your own company, I'm working with this leadership team, and they're the executive team that's around the CEO. So it's the CEO and her top executives. They were addressing a meeting of the second level leaders. And what they did was they just presented kind of like, here's the information. And what they didn't do was think about and put themselves in the shoes of those leaders, because this information was challenging in some ways to digest, and it was like a lot of change. The executives had been dealing with the change for weeks, maybe months. So they were already digested. But they didn't realize that these next level leaders would be very surprised to hear all this, would be maybe alarmed in some cases to hear all this, would not know what to do with this. So they missed kind of meeting them where they are and bringing them along. And so kind of preparing in advance and thinking about, what is the audience I'm speaking to? What do they want and need to hear from me? What can I expect them to be like? What can I predict will be the concerns and objections they will have? And kind of going through that. That's all a great part of communication. And then tuning yourself in that way. And so knowing when you need to be serious. I work with one executive, and I should say knowing when you need to be serious and when you can be laid back. I work with one executive, and he's very laid back, and he's super charming and fun, and especially one-on-one. But he doesn't then adjust his style to be intense and leaning forward and focused when the moment requires it. So he's only got one speed. His one speed is laid back. So part of communication is being able to adjust your speed and adjust your style to meet the people where they are that you're dealing with.
I mean, can you learn that? Or
Sure.
he's the laid back way, that his natural way, and you gotta work quite a lot on adjusting to a different style, because that's not you, right? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, first of all, you can learn. You're human. Didn't you just say this before? You're human. We can learn anything,
Absolutely.
right?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of ways to learn that. Number one, you got to have self-awareness. Oh yeah, I am like that. I intend to learn something different. And then it's about practice. What would it look like to be more intense, more leaning forward? You can find people, either role models inside of your company or videos or whatnot, to find out what are the behavioral tools that people use to showcase themselves as intense, as focused, as into it, leaned in, whatever you want to call it, and emulate those tools. It can also be physically recognizing, I'm not sure what I'm going to do with my voice, but I'm definitely going to literally physically sit more close, sit up front. And those are all tools that are eminently learnable. I worked with an executive a while ago, and he was known as a little bit, I'm just going to use a word, he was known a little bit as like a juvenile delinquent. Like, he was fun. He was like, the image was like him in the back of the room with his foot up on the wall, smoking a cigarette. It was like, that was kind of his vibe. And he was funny, and he would always throw like a little wry comment into the meeting, and often it would be like a little bomb and watch it explode, and he would enjoy that. And it was sort of mischievous. Well, that wasn't working for him in this company. It was working for him a little bit, and then it wasn't working for him as he got more senior at all. So that's his personality. What are you going to do? Well, here's what he did. He stopped drinking. That's number one. He didn't show up at work events anymore and then drink a lot. Number two, he dressed differently. He didn't show up anymore as a sort of like jeans and juvenile delinquent. He put on more formal, not like a suit, but more formal clothes. Number three, he began to nod at other people when he would call it head bobbing, right? He sort of thought, oh my God, this head bobbing. But yep, that's what people do. In the meetings, you nod and you're like, oh yes, good point. Yes, nodding. He stopped throwing provocative comments into the meeting just to see what would happen. And if he did have a point of view that was different from others, that's okay. He would couch it in words like, I guess I have a different point of view. I'd love to share kind of how I see it, which is different from how you guys see it. Here's how I'm saying it. as opposed to you idiot or whatever. Right.
Right. Okay.
So, I'm just giving you a few examples of a number of ways that he was able to literally change behavior and therefore change the perception that others had of him. And I don't believe it's just who you are. I mean, of course, part of it is your personality, of course. And also, if I cut you open, I wouldn't see leaned in or laid back or, provocative or mischievous inside of you. I wouldn't see that. There are all these things that we can do to change our behavior. And if it's not immoral, unethical, or illegal, I say, if that's what your company needs from you, you should focus more on doing that.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned these three different aspects of how he showed up, how he dressed, and then how he communicated, nod, and the whole thing, which builds executive presence, according to what you just said.
Yes.
And you gave an example of how he probably disagreed with others, which is something that quite a lot you have to do.
You should do.
At the top.
We're not paying you to agree with everybody.
Exactly. But how do you disagree without creating confrontation? Especially when you're disagreeing with your boss or with a peer, which is another senior executive. Yeah. How do you go about that without offending the other person or kind of stepping over?
Well, there's a few tools. So first of all, I did a whole TEDx talk on how do you increase your disagreement quotient, right? Your ability to disagree with other people. But I would say there's two tools I'll bring up. Number one is, before you speak your mind, it's helpful to, as I always say, listen the hell out of the other person. As in, Damien, it's very interesting. Let me make sure I understand. Tell me more about what you have in mind. Yeah, I'm still not seeing it. So give me examples of how this is going to work. I'm really drawing you out and I'm listening. And then I've understood the full context, because sometimes when you listen harder, you realize, oh, we actually agree, right? That does happen. Okay, so that's number one. Oh, sometimes we agree mostly, and then, I'll just make this up, but you keep saying collaborate. And what I think is we need to tell them what to do. And if I just go on your first word around collaborate, I assume that what it means, and then I disagree, and then I tell you why you're wrong, and that's all we get. But actually, if I keep trying to understand what you mean by collaborate, we literally might mean the same thing, right? We're just sort of expressing it differently. That happens a lot, right?
Even in families, yeah.
Totally, right? Then the second thing I would suggest is use more words. So Damien, first of all, I love how you just thought that out. That I really get where you're coming from. I also honestly think that if I were in your shoes, I'd probably see it the same way. I do have a different point of view. And the way I'm thinking about it is actually quite different. So for example, you think we should wait to launch the thing until next year. And I'm very concerned that if we wait to launch the thing to next year, we're going to miss the market. And I really understand all the risks that you just expressed about and you may be right about those risks. But big picture, if we wait to launch the thing, we're going to miss the market. And I'm wondering if we could explore together how we might be able to mitigate those risks and also launch more quickly. Right. So now I'm inviting you into a discussion. I'm not saying, what are you talking about? We can't wait or whatever.
Right. So you really listen to the other person, seek to understand before being understood. Right.
Definitely true. But I want to highlight it's also use more words. When you use more words, it softens your approach. So it's good point. I see where you're coming from. It's also agreeable, right? I see where you're coming from. I'd love to offer a different perspective if that would be okay, as opposed to plunk, right? And
use more words.
It's very,
when you disagree, use more words.
It softens your approach when you think about more words you can use.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. That's a very helpful one.
I'd like to say something about that also. So some people would say, I don't have time to use more words. But if I use more words, it'll be less clear. We talked about simplifying and, being very clear. Sure, yeah. So number one, that's situational, right? Number two, I know, like, this is when people also say, I'm going to give you a different example. I'm going to come back to this. People will often say, I let my people do what they need to do. I'm not a micromanager. But their people are not getting any direction because you are not stepping in when you need to. I'm not a micromanager. I understand. But what does the situation call for? What the situation calls for is, we don't have to call it a micromanager. We don't have to label it. The situation calls for more direction from you, and you need to give more direction to be an effective leader in this circumstance. It's not about you. It's about what's the circumstance and the people that you're dealing with required. So same about using more words. I don't like to use more words. I understand that. But if you're trying
But if that's going to help you.
Yeah. If you're trying to sort of disagree without being disagreeable, one tool that you're going to find very helpful is to use more words. Do what you want. But I'm just telling you, that's actually going to help.
Use more words.
Yeah.
All right. It happens in this place. You gave me the example of this leader that say, well, we need to do it in the parking lot, and next year they will ask him, that story you were telling at the beginning. Do you have any advice for leaders, something they can do to create this environment where people can feel comfortable disagreeing with him or her?
Yeah. So psychological safety.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was just on a panel with Amy Edmondson, who's the sort of the creator, the inventor of psychological safety. I would say this: psychological safety is essential, not because it makes you nicer, or it makes you a better person. Not because of that. It's because you will never find out what's actually going on, and you won't have your people telling you what's really going on and kind of bringing their sort of creativity to the table if you don't create it in the context of psychological safety. So what that means is, specifically, if people are afraid to tell you the truth, this did happen in a company that I worked in. There was a senior executive who was breaking a ton of rules and actually probably breaking the law. And one person was like, I think there might be a problem. And nobody listened to that person. And then that situation went on for years, and nobody caught it because the senior leaders did not create psychological safety for the junior people to say, hey, this is a problem. That's one problem. The second problem is, if you bring up a new idea, what the most common response to bringing up a new idea that everybody feels is, that's never going to work. It's never going to work. And you're uncomfortable bringing it up. And you are never going to be able to get people to bring their crazy ideas to work if you don't create a context where people can bring up ideas without shame and without the discomfort of that's never going to work. So that's why psychological safety is so important. And it starts with you as the leader. So number one, when people bring you new ideas, you'd be like, I love it. New ideas are fantastic. Well, so let's see if it works, or what should we do with that? You can also have an exercise that I work with a lot with my leaders, which is, I like the idea of 20 bad ideas. How are we going to solve this problem? Let's do 20 bad ideas. Yeah. I don't want your good ideas. Just want your bad ideas. And then people are funny. People are funny in the sense of oh no, this isn't bad enough, this idea. Right. Okay. You can write it down anyway. We'll take you all bad ideas. The point is, it takes your pressure off to bring good ideas. Do you have any good ideas? No. Well, can we come up with bad ideas? Yeah. I have plenty of bad ideas. I always start by saying for example, let's assume that if we all stand on our head, let's just stand on our head and see what happens. That's a terrible idea. Great. Keep going. Right?
It
counts. Yeah.
Good.
Let's count it. We all have 19 more bad ideas to come with. And those are the kinds of activities that help create the context of psychological safety. And it goes without saying that when someone tells you, I think that you are doing something wrong, you don't have to agree. As in, for example, you are too we're too focused on the way the meeting is set up, and it doesn't give us enough time to talk through important ideas. So what I know to be true is we need to have the meeting set up and focused and structured in a certain way, otherwise we're never going to get through it. But I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is, maybe I am. Good point. And by the way, maybe you are. That's a good point. Yeah. Thank you for bringing that up. Let me think about it. Tell me more about what you think. And then it could also be Gina, to the whole meeting. Gina gave me feedback that our meetings are a little bit too structured. Honestly, I'm kind of a structured person, so I can see I'm bringing that to the table. I'm considering whether or not we should be a little less structured. I'm working on that. But I just want to say publicly, Gina, thank you for your input. It's very helpful. If other people have other ideas, I may or may not take them, but I will always listen to your input. So it's important that people give their input. Even if I don't necessarily take it, I still want to hear everything.
It's crazy because you think about all these diversity initiatives in companies, and you can have all the diversity in the world that you can have, but if you don't create that psychological safety where people can disagree and share their thoughts, and then it's not worth it.
No, you won't.
Right?
You don't get the most out of people if you don't have psychological safety.
It is crazy. And talking about meetings, which is something you just briefly mentioned, I love because you have a like a framework or a couple of questions that you need to, the team needs to ask itself to see, hey, are we having a productive meeting? Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. At the end of the meeting, the 3 helpful questions are: number 1, what did we decide here? Number 2, who else needs to know? And number 3, who will do what by when? And if you get those 3 questions right at the end of the meeting, you probably had a good meeting and you have a conclusion, and then you'll actually have forward motion. If you don't, especially that first one, what did we decide here? It's amazing. You're meeting 6 people and you say, what did we decide here? It's incredible what talk about diversity, a diverse set of perspectives you have about what did we decide here.
That's
and then
crazy.
Who will do what by when? Who will do by when is like, we have these meetings and meetings and meetings. We're like, we should do this. Yes, we should. Good. Let's do that. Okay, that's not going to happen unless we have an owner.
It's crazy, but so very useful tips because it gives you, puts everyone on the same page, and it gives you what you need to do and what we're doing this otherwise. And I made a comment on one of your posts.
Oh, you did?
Talking about this, and meetings are mostly a waste of time unless you do those things that you're teaching here.
We agree.
So that's great. There's another type of meetings, which are the one-on-ones, and you talk about this being a very strong and helpful tool for leadership.
Yes.
Right. So what are executives typically getting wrong about one-on-ones, and how can they use this time more effectively to achieve what they want to achieve?
So number 1, they're not having one-on-ones. That's a big problem with the one-on-ones. They're not having them. They move them around. They don't have them, whatever. Yeah. So they're not having their time with their executives. They don't really know what's going on. Number 2, when they do have the one-on-ones, it's always like my agenda and also a status update. You can do status updates by email. The question with the one-on-ones is, what are we missing? What are we not doing? Let's think together. Let's dream together. What are some of the blockers that you're dealing with? What do I not know? What's some bad news I don't know about the organization? Those are the kinds of questions you can ask in one-on-ones, which really make them feel empowered. I would also say this. I'm not going to talk about lead. I'm talking about middle managers now. I think the tool of the middle manager, the best tool is the one-on-one. So we have a lot of issues with people aren't giving their all to work. They're kind of, just mailing it in. They work remotely. No one's checking on them like that. And then we also have this issue around burnout. Now, burnout is not because you have too much work. It's because it's too hard to get the work done. There's too many processes. There's too many things in the way. It's hard to reach people. It's just so draining. Like we don't have the right systems and tools. It's so draining. So when you as a middle manager are having one-on-ones with your people, you solve both of those problems. The burnout is like, hey, Damien, I know you're working so hard. How can I help you push this thing through? Or like, oh man, I know. You're like feeling like you're all alone at work. I'm like, I know, man, it can be really hard to get stuff done here. Listen, I want you to know I really appreciate your effort. I really want you to know that like we're really valued. And don't forget, when you do get this done, it's going to be so significant and impactful. Why don't I help you by doing this or that? Or let's think together. That's like the motivating against burnout. It's also like, hey, Damien, I'm noticing you. I'm noticing that you're not getting that much done, right? So like, do you have another full-time job? Yeah. Like, is there another full-time job that I'm not aware of? Because I need you to get more stuff done. So it does both of those things. When it's like, heads up, I'm paying attention.
Great. And we're running out of time here. Alisa, this went by fast. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you think that you would like to share to senior executives at large companies that, any practical or any thoughts you have? Yeah.
I have 2 things I'd like to share. Number 1, in the back of my book, From Startup to Grown Up, I have 14 scripts that help you have delicate or difficult conversations, including how to announce layoffs, including how to tell someone they didn't get a promotion, including, how to have career conversations with your people, even if you don't know what they're actually doing, how to announce bad news, all those kinds. Certainly how to tell someone they're being layered, how to tell somebody, how to fire somebody, like all of those things that people have a lot of trouble with. In the back of my book, I have those scripts. In addition, I have scripts on my website. If you go to alisacohn.com/scripts, it's 5 additional scripts to help you have delicate conversations and one to make your life better. And those are very helpful tools for all of my clients. The reason I created those is because my clients all really benefit from scripts to actually help them get their words around, or their mouth around the words of the conversation, to ease their way into doing it.
That's great. And appreciate you sharing that, Alisa. We run out of time now. So once again, really appreciate you coming on to the podcast, sharing those very helpful, practical tips that executives can start applying right away. So I really appreciate you making the time.
Thank you for having me.